Hey everyone, Eric Hayden here in the garden. The first video for a long time. It's been a busy week and a half for me. A lot of work and then an unexpected trip out of town. In the meantime, we've got a tremendous amount of rain. 4 inches last week, and then we got about another 3 overnight last night. So the garden has been neglected, so we will talk about that today. We're going to talk about deadheading. I'm going to link to a video where I go over how, why, and when you deadhead, a little more detail from last year. I'm going to show you that Mother Nature still takes care of things, even if you're not out there taking every bloom off. It's okay. Give yourself a break. The garden will be just fine. We'll talk a little bit about these weeds that have crept up, and then we're going to show you some of the garden as of here, the middle part of June. First things first, it's been very wet. The inner tube of this rain gauge is 1 inch. The overflow indicates we probably had another 2 to that, so maybe about 3 inches overnight. I will link in the video tomorrow a program called Cocoa Raws that you can join, and you can buy a gauge like this. This is the most accurate to get. I know they have digital gauges at the big box stores and online, and they give you an idea of how much rain has fallen, but nothing beats the manual way, going out and seeing how much rain fell. And as a gardener, I can't say it enough how much you need a rain gauge. Of course, with the downpour last night, I knew I didn't need to water today, but exactly how much rain fell, and knowing that we had about 3 inches, I'm good for many days of not watering. So knowing how much rain fell is very important as a gardener, so I encourage you to get a rain gauge when you can. So a lot of maintenance in the garden. Obviously I need to deadhead. What is deadheading? It's taking blooms, hopefully at this stage, and removing them. It's good for disease in the garden and overall maintenance and health, just to get rid of these petals and clean things up. It also encourages new growth quicker, and I'll show you an example of that. And what I mean by disease is if you leave them stay like this and they get to this point, you can get botrytis and some different diseases, and it just doesn't look attractive. So deadheading is the removal of spent blooms, again, hopefully at this stage, if not by this stage, and certainly by that stage. Now, life happens, and I want to show you the garden like this because things are not always perfect. And let's face it, roses are hardy. You don't have to be, while it's good to deadhead, sometimes you just can't get to it. So I want to show you what happens if you don't get to it. Mother Nature's been around for a long time and things work out, correct? So here's an example. This is a Lena. It has not been deadheaded. You can see the old blooms on there. The petals will fall off and new growth will happen. And here's a good example of this. Here's our dead bloom. And then, you know how we usually like to go down to a set of 3 or preferably 5 leaves to prune. So here's our dead bloom. Here is our, one of our first sets of 3 leaves. Here's 3 leaves right here. 1, 2, 3. And here's new growth coming out of it. So what deadheading does is it speeds that process up. So instead of waiting until the petals fall off and the plant knows, hey, it's time to send up a new cane, it speeds it up by maybe a couple weeks. But you can see that, you go down to the first good set of 3 leaves. Here's 1. And if you go farther down, you know how we usually try to say go down to 5? In my video that I'm going to link below, it doesn't matter in the sense of if you just want to get out here and leave a lot of leaves on the bush, just go to the first set of 3 is fine. But you see how this is a thinner part of the cane? If you were to go down to 5, here's our a good set of 5 leaves. Look how much thicker the cane is down here. And here's another example. Here's a set of 5 leaves, and again, new growth is coming out. I didn't prune any of this. This is just Mother Nature doing her thing. The reason why we say go down to 5 is the stem is much thicker down there, so this cane coming out should be of substantial width and girth. So the bottom line of this is, yes, deadhead, yes, try to do it in an efficient manner, but if you don't, the bush is still going to do its thing. It just will be a couple weeks behind where it was before. And it's no big deal. But if you want a quicker repeat of blooms, that's why you want a deadhead. And again, what leaf set do you go? If you go to the 3, it might be a weaker cane, maybe a smaller flower. If you go lower in the bush to a set of 5s, it's going to be a bigger cane, maybe a bigger flower. And it's going to really depend on what you want in the garden. Sometimes I don't want to go real far down on the bush to a set of 5 because I'm trying to grow for height, and in the summertime we get quite hot, so I don't want to take too many leaves off. So an example like this, if it's a smaller bush, I don't want to go too low on the bush to prune for that next set of blooms, whereas if it's a tall bush, I will. So I showed you an example of the canes coming out regardless. I wanted to show you the other example, what it looks like a couple weeks later. This is Folklore, again, has not been deadheaded. So I waited so long. There's still some blooms that need to be deadheaded, but now we actually have buds. We're already into our second round of blooms. So the whole point of emphasis is, if you don't do anything, it's still going to be okay. The plant will still do its thing. And I was trying to find an example. It's hard to see in here. I had one scoped out. Let's see here. All right, here we go. So I had one scoped out for demonstration purposes. Again, this is the original bloom 3 weeks ago. I did not deadhead. Just like the Alina, down below a set of leaves comes out a new cane, and here it is, a new cane with a bud. And you'll notice it's a little spindly. It's kind of a small bud now, because since I didn't deadhead, the first growth was probably at that set of 3 leaves, and it was higher on the bush. So the point of the video is, no matter what you do, it's going to generate new blooms. It's going to be okay, so give yourself a break. If you do get a chance to deadhead, though, you can potentially have your cycle of blooms quicker, and then also you're preventing disease in the garden, and you're producing stronger canes because you're able to prune exactly where you want, versus Mother Nature just sending up canes, wherever she wants. Other maintenance thing I have to do in the garden, this crazy thing. Comment, do you know what this is before I tell you? So here's our plant. This is silver cream. Obviously these leaves look different than these. This is what we call a sucker, and the roses I get are on Fortuniana, a lot of it, and it suckers, especially where I get it from, a lot. Sometimes I keep these canes, and I've been trying to root them unsuccessfully. This has been difficult to root. Some plants are easier to root than others, but I will need to prune that out because I don't want that taking over. So that's it in the garden. The whole main point was, again, deadheading is a good thing to do. You will stimulate the blooms quicker. Your cycle of blooms might be a couple weeks quicker than if you just let things go. If you just let things go, it's going to be okay. The roses are still going to shoot up, send up some new canes. It just might be some weaker stems and some smaller blooms versus being able to control. Like in this case, this is Jewel Grace. I could certainly, prune lower where the cane is much, much thicker. These are some beautiful blooms. Roses come in flushes, so they will have a bloom cycle of every 5 to 7 weeks. So 5 to 7 weeks after you get your first round of blooms, you'll have more. But you'll see others just kind of that are a little later on the bush. You still can get some nice color on them, like we showed you with that Jewel Grace. So that is it in the garden today. You can see I've got a lot of maintenance to do. I will do some deadheading. I will do some weeding. For the most part, it's mainly sedges that are in the garden. And then I've got to do some maintenance with, unfortunately, it looks like some canes have fallen over. We had some pretty bad wind last night. I know my potted plants were over, but I can see here, this is not good. This is Cajun Moon. Looks like it got knocked over because of the wind. So it's always disconcerting, especially when it's a newer plant like this, but it'll certainly recover. And you can see we're headed toward the next cycle of blooms, some nice new growth. And despite all that rain, I was able to keep up a weekly spray up until about a week and a half ago. And you can see the leaves are very, very healthy. No black spot on them. I'm sure that just jinxed me, but I've got to get out there and spray again because we're at about the 2-week window. Usually if you spray every 1 to 2 weeks and you rotate your sprays, a systemic and a protectant, you usually can keep that disease at bay. It's the consistency that's important. One last thing I'll show you, since we've had about 7 inches of rain, sometimes I did a video before, your leaves can yellow for a lot of different reasons, but I've noticed this here. And again, weather is just really, really important. Pay attention to the weather. A yellow leaf in hot weather Speckled leaf could mean spider mites, whereas rain, it could be a nutrient deficiency. I've noticed in our garden, since it's so sandy, that we can really lose a lot of the nutrients after heavy rain. So the green leaves will lighten a little bit, and even my potted plants on the deck, I'll show you these petunias, they look like a light green now versus the dark green they were before I went out of town. Once the rains die down, I'll put a little nitrogen in, especially some liquid, something quick acting, not before the rain because it'll just leach out. But see how this is a lighter green. It wasn't as dark as this New Guinean patience, but definitely a lighter green than when I left. The nutrients have leached out, either in this case of the potting soil or the ground. So I'll do a little liquid feed based on what's happened. So lots to cover in this video. We mentioned why you should deadhead, but don't worry about it too much if you get stuck working or family life comes up. And we also mentioned, the weather, knowing how much rain falls is important. These are some of our celebrity tomatoes. Knowing how much rain fell is very, very important. And then planning your garden based on the weather. So now that I know we've had a lot of rain, I'll wait for it to subside, and I'm going to do a little liquid fertilization to pump some of those nutrients back into the plant. I'm not really pushing them because we're going to be getting hot here as we get into the summer, but just the maintenance of them so they continue to grow. That's it. As always, I appreciate the new subscribers. If you're just joining us, lots of videos below from the last couple years in the garden. You'll be pretty surprised where this garden started and how big it's gotten here over the last 2 years. Have a good one, everyone.